Whistlety, rustlety, hey Johnny, dustlety, nickety, knackety, rustical quality, now, now, now. I'm married, my wife in the month of June. Whistlety, rustlety, now, now, now. I brought her home by the light of the moon. Whistlety, rustlety, hey Johnny, dustlety, nickety, knackety, rustical quality, willety, wallety, now, now, now.
Hey folks, it's the Blind Guy here, and on this episode of Good Old Movie Recommendations, we are going to take a look at 1963, The Birds, starring Tippi Hedren, Rod Taylor, a very young Veronica Cartwright, who I didn't actually recognize in the movie, and Jessica Tandy. This movie's got quite the cast. It's directed by the Alfred Hitchcock, of course. The general plot of the movie is Tippi Hedren plays a wealthy kind of prankster who falls for Rod Taylor's character, who's a lawyer, and she goes up to Bodega Bay to try to pursue him. And then as all of that's happening, there's some tension with her mother, or with Rod Taylor's character's mother, played by Jessica Tandy. And there's a school teacher who used to date Rod Taylor. There's like this interesting tension love story thing going on. And then all of a sudden, birds attack, and the movie turns into a horror movie. First of all, I have kind of mixed feelings about this movie. It's not my favorite Hitchcock movie. I think as a kid I liked it more than I do now. But it is a good old movie. But let's talk about some of the things I don't like in the movie. First of all, it's almost like that love story. And movies do this a lot. You guys will see these in my reviews a lot, where it's almost like the story that's being told is more interesting than the story that it transforms into. I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, well, this love story is actually fairly interesting, and then all of a sudden birds show up. And so that's one aspect of it where it's almost like I'm not sure why it sets all that up if it's not going to pursue it throughout the entire movie. And I read something where Alfred Hitchcock said he actually wanted to do that. He wanted the movie to feel like a different movie, and then all of a sudden, surprise, here are these birds attacking, which is interesting, but probably didn't work as well as he wanted because the movie's called The Birds, and audiences seemed to know what they were getting into. So there's that aspect of it. Actually, my mom, while I was watching the movie with her and my dad, she said, she went full Jeff Goldblum and actually said, are there going to actually be birds in this Birds movie?
Now eventually you do plan to have dinosaurs on your dinosaur tour, right? Hello? Hello? Yes?
And the birds do end up showing up, and it changes the feel of the movie completely. The other thing that I don't particularly like in the movie is there is lots and lots of this kind of thing. For an extended period of time, and there's a phone booth scene that is impressive from a technical standpoint with the effects, but it goes on for way too long when Tippi Hedren's character is trapped in the phone booth. There are some fairly violent scenes in this movie, especially for 1963. There's a man with his eyes pecked out that you see a couple times, a couple shots of that, which is like, wow, I did not expect that in 1963. So it does have some of that. And so those are some, I don't really have an issue with that, but something to be aware of. Not something to watch with your kids. But those are some of the nitpicky things I have with it. And I think that's one reason it's not my favorite Hitchcock movie. Things like Notorious and Rebecca and movies like that I prefer because I feel like they stay consistent to their story a little bit better. But I also know that if you tried to make this movie's 2 hours long, and if you tried to make a 2-hour movie about just birds attacking people, that also wouldn't work. So you're kind of caught in a catch-22 there. We have to either do a film that changes to birds attacking or make it a much, much shorter movie. And so I understand that part of it. So the things I like in it, the acting is solid. The dialogue is solid. It seems like Alfred Hitchcock movies almost always have very solid dialogue. He's the master of suspense, and he does that in this movie as well. There's several scenes where he builds and builds tension, especially the scene where Tippi's character is sitting outside of a school building where the kids are singing inside the building, and these crows start amassing around her very slowly, very ominously. And then there's 2 on the jungle gym, and then all of a sudden there's 6 on the jungle gym, and then pretty soon when you look, there's like 30 on the jungle gym. And so that's just masterfully done in this movie. It makes it interesting because it makes you think, if birds really did go crazy, it really would be pretty scary because there's so many of them and you really couldn't do anything about it. The movie, interesting enough, was inspired by a true event in another small town in California where the birds in 1961 started going crazy. There was all seagulls because they were eating a type of algae that caused them to get really aggressive and go and start vomiting everywhere in this town and dive bombing people. And so Alfred Hitchcock read that story and was inspired by it. So there's a little hint of truth in some aspects of this movie. The movie uses some pretty impressive special effects at times, and then some that didn't date as well. They had to use a sodium vapor type instead of a blue screen. They had to use a sodium vapor technology in order to do the transposing the birds into the shots, because I guess their wings flap too fast for a blue screen. And so that was interesting. I thought they actually had to develop several new techniques to do some of the special effects. I did not realize that when they fly out of the chimney into the room, that was transposed. That effect looks amazing. Some of the other effects don't look quite as good. The sounds for the birds, a lot of them were done on the predecessor to the synthesizer, like an electric organ. And I thought that was interesting. My mom thought that maybe they were cat sounds. They do sound a lot like cats, but they actually were synthesized on this special equipment that came out in the 1920s. I found that interesting as well. The movie is also very interesting in the fact that it does not have a musical score whatsoever. There is some music in this movie that's played on the piano and sung by the kids in the school, but there is no score for this movie. And that is really fascinating because it almost, at times, it increases the tension because the person will be walking through a house, and Hitchcock's really good at showing the person's face and then showing their perspective and then showing their face. That's really well done by him in a lot of his movies. But he uses that in this movie as a person's moving through the house to build tension up without any musical score. And I just think that's so fascinating. It does make the movie seem a little slower at times without music, but at the same time, he can deliver information to the audience by just camera shots without having to incur a full bunch of expositional dialogue. So it's really well done in that regard with showing and not necessarily telling, and then not using music. So I found that very interesting as well. When the movie came out, it was kind of mixed reviewed. And to be honest, today it's looked on with far more favor than it had in 1963. I think audiences were a little thrown off by it being a horror movie. Hitchcock had just done Psycho, but prior to that, he didn't really have a reputation for doing any kind of horror type movies. And so I think maybe audiences had enjoyed his movies up to that point and then thought, is this all we're going to get from Alfred from here on out? And so maybe that led to some of the mixed reviews on the movie, because the movie is well done. Like, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. It is a well done movie. It's got some really fascinating, intense scenes in it. It's got a pretty cool, ambiguous ending to it where you're thinking, okay, I can work with that. It doesn't seem to wrap up too quickly or anything like that. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I do like this movie. I just think that Hitchcock has got some better films for sure. And then there's some controversy around the film because Tippi Hedren came out and said that Alfred Hitchcock had sexually harassed her and tried to assault her during the filming of The Birds. And then in 2016, when the Me Too movement came out, #MeToo, she then changed her story saying, no, none of that actually happened until the end of the filming of Marnie, because I always thought it didn't make sense for her to say that happened on The Birds. And then she actually agreed to come back and film another movie with him. And then later she said, no, that didn't happen until the end of Marnie. And then later she said, no, he never actually touched me. He just essentially tried to blackmail her with her contract for sexual favors. And so I tend to probably think that parts of that are true. And then the fact that the story has changed means that some parts of it probably are embellished a bit. And just because of the culture of the time in 2016, maybe it was a bit more the thing to do. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you believe all of what Tippi Hedren is saying? Because she also waited till after Alfred Hitchcock died, which I'm not a super big fan of that either, when the person that's being accused can't defend themselves for anything. So I tend to think there are probably some aspects of that, because that is an element that is definitely still present in Hollywood today and was very present during these times. So I have to think probably there are some aspects of it that are true, but probably some aspects that maybe are misremembered a little bit. So unfortunately, that's something we have to do with some of these directors, is we have to try to separate the artist from the actual person, because let's face it, a lot of people in Hollywood are pretty awful people when it comes down to it, as are many of us. So I shouldn't be too judgmental about that, but Hollywood definitely has no place to preach to the rest of us, that's for sure. So let me know what you guys think of that controversy that came out in 2016. Tippi is still alive, actually. She's 93 years old, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. But, and this was her first movie, actually. She had been a model for 10 years, and Alfred Hitchcock discovered her in a commercial and wanted to get that girl, is how he referred it, into his next movie, and they found her and put her in The Birds. And her job in this, her acting performance in this movie is fairly strong, especially for a debut. And I think it also is a testament to Alfred, who now she says was amazing on this movie and treated her really well in this movie, as a testament to his directing chops for sure. So those are my thoughts on 1963's The Birds. It scores an IMDb rating of 7.6. I actually think that might be a little high. I maybe drop it down to 7.4, 7.3. Not something you should necessarily own, but definitely something you should watch at least once. I think it has inspired a lot of these kind of natural horror movies where you've got bees or dogs or birds or sharks or some kind of animal that's chasing people. This is one of the first ones, and still one of the best ones that ever did it. So check it out for that. If you want to support us, our Venmo is in the description. Our email is in the description. You can make any donation, and I will do a review that you request. We'll do board games, movies, anything that you guys want me to check out. And I hope you guys check out the rest of my videos and subscribe to the channel. We are growing, and it's so much fun when we grow and you guys are checking out my videos. I really, really appreciate you guys. And I'll see you on the next episode of A Blind Guy's View. Laters on the Menjay.
Laters on the Menjay.
Ships on bigger of the waves, a skimming virus, summits to the verge.